So, Sea Milk, here we are in Vietnam, but there's one thing I've always wanted to ask you. You came here a couple of years ago, and you did the Ho Chi Minh Trail, right?
Yeah, this is actually my third time in Nam.
Okay, so maybe you could tell me a little bit about that. I'm curious. How's it changed?
Honestly, that's actually what I want to talk about, because it's very, very different. Some things are the same. It's very different than when I first got here.
You just use unsecured internet at a coffee shop to send our most sensitive, our most important data? Oh my god, what are we gonna do?
Good for the Earth Corp. Without a VPN, they lost all their most important client data and one of the biggest data leaks in history. The story didn't end there, though. It was the clients, the people, the everyman, the every woman. Those are the people that really suffered the damage. The oversight of not securing their internet really pushed the victims over the edge. After they called the Surfshark, however, things quickly changed. This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN is Winston and I's favorite VPN because it's so easy to use, it's fantastic with all its features and functionality, but it's not only for internet security, it actually has a lot of other purposes as well. But speaking of security, don't you want to make sure that you're safe online too? When you put your name and your credit card information, all that kind of stuff, your browsing information, what you're looking up online, don't you want to make sure that nobody else can see that? That's why you use a VPN, because a VPN, like Surfshark, makes sure that all that stuff is encrypted. But like I said, it's not just about security, it's also for fun, because you can go on any single streaming website that has a different library in a different country and see what that country can see too. For example, if I'm on Netflix and I can't see a show because it's not on America's version of Netflix, all I have to do is swap over to a different country's server, and then I can see that entire library from that country too. Don't forget to go to surfshark.deals/ADVChina and you use the code ADVChina, you're gonna get 83% off a 2-year plan, plus you're gonna get 3 extra months for free. But you're also gonna be helping out the channel and supporting us as well, so we really appreciate you doing that. Don't forget to go to surfshark.deals/ADVChina or click the link in the description.
Actually,
Thanks.
there was all these TV shows back then, like Long Way Round or whatever, right?
Oh, yeah, that was a big thing with, what's his face, Ewan McGregor, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people my age at that time, think about it, you're like early 20s, right?
Yeah.
And what better thing to do than literally leave everything behind and get on a bike and start riding around different countries? So there's stuff out there about some epic rides you could do that are not just like going around the world, but you pick a country and what's the most interesting way you could do it. There's this thing that people were talking about, and that was to go down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And as an American, with the whole Vietnam War and modern history, to go down the Ho Chi Minh Trail on a motorcycle, but from the perspective of like a Vietnamese person, like starting from the north, going down into the south.
So you're like cosplaying as a Vietnamese?
Almost like a cosplaying as a Vietnamese, but just to see what the other side would have been like starting in the communist north and then ending up in the American back south.
Okay.
Even though it's it's fully communist now, I thought that would be a fantastic idea, and I had this unbelievable almost Marco Polo syndrome thing going on where I was like, not only am I going to do that, and go down the Ho Chi Minh Trail where Ho Chi Minh went to conquer the whole country, right? But I'm also going to do it on a Soviet motorcycle, because back in the war they were using these 2-stroke Minsk bikes, as they're called, right?
I feel like they were using bicycles more than anything else.
I mean, yeah, but they had these Minsk bikes, right? They did. They were at least carrying around weaponry and stuff, and getting transporting things around. They're kicking America's ass as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I was like, why not do it on if I'm gonna be in this commie ass place with all these hammers and sickles and shit and going down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, I got to do it on what they were using. Right?
I get it.
So me and my buddy, we left. I was living in Taiwan at the time, and I was riding every day. I loved riding, and I get to Vietnam, and I'm blown away because I had lived in China for a year, but it was way messier than China. It was wild, right?
Yeah.
There was just people screaming everywhere and slaying chickens on the side of the road, burning big piles of garbage. It was like China, but more condensed, more crowded. Because I started up in Hanoi, where we are in the north, and I got to this place and I'm like looking for this. There's all these shops around, like where we got these bikes here. It's like a motorcycle rental, but every single one of them. This is like 10 years ago. Every single one of them is renting out Japanese bikes, right? So you have this fantasy in your head that all these people are putting around these 2-strokes, these old Minsk bikes. You read about it, and you're like, I'm gonna get one of these. And I looked around everywhere, and everyone's just selling, like, you're renting out Hondas and Kawasaki's and shit.
So you kind of had a fantasy of, let's go on safari, but I want to be on an elephant's back. With
Yes. I'm in Thailand riding on an elephant's neck.
Helmet or whatever.
That's exactly.
All right, I get it.
Like you straight up Marco Polo. Keep in mind, I only been in Asia for like a year and a half.
I get it. I mean, I get it.
I wanted to do it right, Like this is what people do. They ride around on 2-stroke war Russian Soviet bikes.
My question is though, like, it's a 2-stroke bike though.
Yeah.
I didn't see any, like, where do you get your 2-stroke oil and stuff around here? Because they just got regular gas stations.
So actually, at least back then, right? They did have 2-stroke at the gas stations.
What,
They had
like the oil and you
2-stroke
just-
mix, yeah.
Oh, like
They would-
actual mix?
Yeah, they'd actually bring up an attendant to fill up your bike with them.
Okay.
If they noticed it was a 2-stroke. There were some gas stations that didn't have it, but especially once we got out of the city, they were everywhere. But anyway, so I finally found this place, and I'm talking to this guy who speaks pretty good English, right? And he's like, just take the Hondas. And I'm like, no, like I'm not, I really want to do it on these Minsk. And he's like, all right, I have 2 of these. I can like get them over here, right? But this shit's like ancient, dude. This was like the most rickety thing. Nothing worked. Like the gauges didn't work. It didn't have a battery, of course.
Yeah.
Kickstart only, obviously. It's this 2-stroke piece of shit. And I have this idea, and I'm in this new country where these bikes flying everywhere. It's dangerous as hell. There's trucks barreling around here. I mean, look around, right? It was wild. It was even worse back then.
Right.
You're choking on the pollution everywhere and shit. And I'm like, I'm gonna get on this 2-stroke bike and do it the right way. I'm gonna ride the whole country. And as soon as I started riding that thing, I'm like, what have I done?
Yeah, they're not very comfortable.
Dude, it's the worst thing you've ever ridden in your life. It's the slowest bike I've ever ridden.
Yep.
It's big though. So it's got this 125 2-stroke motor, but there's no power band or anything. It's
Nope.
like just chugging along, and it literally broke all the time. I mean, there were so many times where I would kick it, and I'm not joking, the carburetor would actually just explode. Like the top of the carburetor would fly off, and gas and oil would spray all over my legs.
Yeah. Makes sense.
I had it rebuilt like so many times, and it was crazy because you'd be around these places, and it's not like in China where there's like little mechanic shops every single where you go. But everyone in Vietnam knew how to fix it. Like, because up until recently, even though they're not using this shit anymore, they knew, exactly what to do to keep these things going. Because until recently, they were using these things. And people loved it. No one, by the way, I saw no one riding these bikes. My
Right.
fantasy was completely wrong. But everyone loved that we were on them, right? These 2 white guys barreling around on these pieces of shit. And people, I think, were a little bit nostalgic, almost like just because like this is what they grew up on,
Yeah.
And it was cool. Like we were getting lost and shit, and like asking soldiers for help, and everyone was just so nice. It was kind of like Taiwan in that like everyone's really friendly, but it was kind of that really pikey charm of China, where it's like just not quite developed yet. But when you get out, I'm telling you, when you get outside like the Hanoi back then, about 10 years ago, I mean, it was pretty gross.
Right.
Like, just open sewage running down the side of the road. Like, it's a big, massive piles of garbage. You have, like, people, it's like animal blood flying all over the place and stuff. It was just really gross. And super dangerous. It's like every time, in China, everyone drives slow.
Yeah.
Vietnam, it's like every time you pull off from a stoplight, everyone's racing, but the grand prize is just not to die. It's literally like, it's like a battle every single time.
I don't know. I kind of like it. I think it's fun.
No, it's awesome.
Gives you this. It's almost like you're entering a race every time you stop at the lights.
It is. It's like a drag race, right?
Yeah.
But it was cool. I mean, every time the bike broke down, there'd be people that would help me out, and very rarely would they accept any money.
Right.
Which was really, really cool. And again, it was that whole north thing. But it was crazy because, I'd stop and like my bike would break, and then somebody would offer me one of those hits from those big bong pipes, those big, huge bamboo bong things.
It's just tobacco, right?
Yeah. That's how people smoke. It's cheaper, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that in China a lot too.
Yeah, for sure. But this is like more ubiquitous. It's kind of
Okay.
just like everywhere. But it was crazy because in China you never have a problem spending money. Like you could always spend money on something, right?
Yeah.
But here in like northern Vietnam back then, like it was a struggle to spend any money. Not because stuff was cheap, which it was. I mean, it was like 20,000 dong to the dollar, and a meal was about that, right?
Sure.
But you couldn't. There was no restaurants. There was no billboards for products. There was just nothing to buy.
Right.
So you're in this cacophony of all this nonsense and stuff's, crazy and everyone's going every which way and stuff. But there's like little corner shops every now and then. And what are you gonna do? You're gonna spend like $1 and you're gonna be full and have all the drinks that you want. It was actually bizarre. It was almost like it wasn't a capitalist country or something.
Yeah, well,
But,
which it isn't. So.
No, I mean, it is now, obviously. But it was pretty crazy. It was pretty wild up there in the north. And we watched it kind of as we went south. It stayed very, like, the people were pretty quiet. They were very helpful, very friendly and stuff. But as soon as you hit that DMZ, which doesn't exist anymore, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's done. It's North and South Vietnam is united now. But there's still as we spoke to this Vietnamese soldier that was on the American side, and he set up a coffee shop right at the DMZ, spoke flawless English with a deep Southern American accent.
Oh, that's bizarre.
Which was insane, right?
Yeah,
He was trained by all the troops there, and he super nice. It was kind of like talking to your grandpa or something. But he told us about it. He said there's something called DMZ in the head. And the DMZ in the head is like, even though Vietnam was conquered by the communists and everything was united, like the people in the South are wildly different than the North to this day. To where like people were just used to already, going for a successful business, or not just trying to make, ends meet and have a meager little farm like they did in the North. People wanted to make money. And you saw that. It was actually the first time I got a whiff of that. It was right when I crossed the DMZ into the South. I was taking pictures of people like I did the whole trip, and I took a picture of these kids on this buffalo, one of those water buffalo, and they asked for money. And that never once happened when I was in the North. Right. No one ever asked me for money. No kids that wanted their pictures taken, that kids do in the rural parts of that part of the world. Or anybody that it was helping me out. No one ever asked for money. You had to like force it on them. And then you get down here and the kids are like, no, you give me money, and in English.
Right. I mean, it makes total sense. That's just the way things go. I guess you could say like East and West Berlin. You also see massive changes if you go across. That's
absolutely
kind of how it is.
It was fascinating. It was the first. Like in the North, I had no one, and this is not an advertisement for communism or anything, but no one tried to scam me or anything in the North.
Right. Well, they probably did, but in other ways.
Maybe in other ways, right? But like, just that being said, like I'm telling you right now, like the big scams of like, oh, I'm gonna go pick, like this one guy goes, oh, I'm gonna go pick up my daughter from the airport in English, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you want to sit down and have a coffee with me? And actually you just buy him coffee.
Right.
He's like, oh, let me take you to this shop. They sell really good rugs here. All that kind of stuff started in the South.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the thing, though. If you go, you were still kind of fresh off the boat, weren't you? So you go anywhere, I found, in developing countries, and it's not just Asia, any developing country. If you go to a tourist area, get this in, like, Eastern Europe as well.
Yeah.
Any kind of tourist area, and you're obviously a tourist, you're not a local, you're going to get taken advantage of all these people that come with you, these, like, tea house scams or, assisted shopping. That happens all the time in China.
Sure.
It's happened to tons of people I know. I mean, I've made a lot of videos about scams in China, but that kind of thing's really common.
Oh, for sure. I'm just telling you, like, in some of these really undeveloped places up in the northern Vietnam, there was no industry for scamming because there's no tourists.
Yeah,
I'm going
of course.
through these villages where they're, drying stuff in the road. Those types of areas. People are nice, just like in rural China. No one's trying to scam you in those areas.
Yeah, and I think you'll find the same in the south if you go to the rural parts as well. It's going to be exactly the same. And it's like India too. It's when you get to those big, well-known metropolises, where people come for tourism. That's where the scammers go. That's where they develop their skills, and that's where they're going to scam you. So I think maybe it's a little less about north and south, and maybe just more about developed versus like rural. Yeah.
Anyway, when I got to the, because I went out in the middle of nowhere off the Ho Chi Minh Trail, so, you're up on the Lao border and stuff where all those unexploded ordnance are.
Yeah.
There's signs everywhere, and people get blown up all the time in this area, so you got to, like, stay on the road. But I'd end up in these areas where there were huge Agent Orange victims.
Right.
Just a ton of them, right? And then we were meeting people with extra thumbs, and everyone was just really nice. But it felt weird because you get told your whole life that, you know, you're the bad guy, you're the bad American that went in there and tried to take over Vietnam and, you know, meddle in their affairs and stuff and did all these horrific things. And it was really sad. I mean, you see kids with massive birth defects. It was really sad, like going through these areas. And it, you know, there's signs up, and you know what you're looking for because there's signs up. It's like this area is being, you know, dealt with from the German government or the U.S. government is doing aid to repair the damage from Agent Orange and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of a nasty chemical then.
It's horrific. I mean, I had tears in my eyes when I was going through some of these villages because these kids, you know, they didn't ask to be born with horrific birth defects.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
It's horrible.
No, it's never nice to see that kind of thing. At the same time, though, like you had nothing to do with it.
No, for sure. But it's, you know, to see it in real life, it's like, oh shit. And you know, we were warned about this from other Americans, like they're not gonna like you there, because keep in mind this is 10 years before, right? This is not like now.
Sure.
A lot of these areas just didn't have a whole lot of tourism, and you had people that were telling us, you know, don't tell people you're American.
Right.
And we were like, that makes a lot of sense. So we were pretending some places we were German or Kiwi or, you know, whatever. Mm-hmm. But when we found out pretty quickly when we started telling people we were American, they liked us even more. Like people were so chill with Americans, they didn't care. And these people that had all these issues due to the, you know, the whole conflict and everything, they didn't judge us for it. And that was really nice because, like, that was something I got a very different vibe from in China, was that although most people in China I met were nice, a lot of people would blame you for being American.
Yeah,
they will blame you for your country's government stuff. I never got that once in Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean, remember we were up in Harbin and those guys. What was the reason again? Why were they were pissed off with America for some reason?
Bullshit propaganda. Like some shit happened where China was mad at the U.S. like always, right?
Yeah, probably a South China Sea thing or something
like that. Almost guaranteed.
Yeah, but I mean. And luckily you didn't answer first because that group of people that like all kind of surrounded us and I think they asked me first, like, where are you from? And I said, I'm from England. They're like, good. As long as you're not American, we hate Americans.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, they look pretty mean.
It was rough, dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, here in Vietnam, it just wasn't like that. I mean, like, obviously I've only been here 3 times, but I've spent, you know, in total, I've spent at least a few months in Vietnam, and I never really had the same situation where people are just being assholes to me for my nationality.
Yeah.
Which was kind of cool. Like, everyone was really helpful and stuff, but it is, like, at least back then, I mean, we've seen poverty here, but, like, it was frickin' poor. Like, some of these areas were bad.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the average salary in some of these areas we're going through were, like, $400 a month. We're, like, you know, sub-Saharan Africa level stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean,
so,
that's how it is. You know what I think would be really like hilariously fascinating is if some of these rural Vietnamese guys went to America, and they tried to, like, I don't know, do the George Washington Trail and like go over the river in a boat or whatever.
The Lewis and Clark Trail, dude.
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose so. But like, wasn't it George Washington crossing some river, and that's why? Yeah, what's that? You guys have that thing with a boat? What is that all about? I don't even know what that's about.
We're not getting to American history lesson, but they could do the George Washington, like, river.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, 'cause the Ho Chi Minh Trail is all about, like, winning a war or whatever.
Yeah.
So the George Washington going over a river, wasn't that also something about the British?
Yeah, the War of Independence, dude.
There we go. So, like, yeah, like, I'd like to see these rural, you know, Vietnamese guys coming to America to do the War of Independence.
You see why that doesn't work out, though?
Why?
Is that America was fighting Vietnam. Right.
Yeah.
And the Ho Chi Minh Trail was used to fight America. Vietnam didn't fight America in the Revolutionary War.
No, it's not my point. My point is it's like war tourism.
Oh, war tourism.
You know what I mean? Like historical war tourism.
Honestly, because the reason is it's modern history. Like, so you're going through these areas with unexploded mines and stuff. They're from a war that was from when my parents were, you know, in high school and in college. It's kind of interesting how recent it was. And there's still very much, you know, effects of that. Like, to see all these, you know, there's like, they call it the American War, right? Here.
Yeah.
And so you'd go to these parks and they'd have like blown up American plane.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is when we shot down the American plane. And it's like, you see that kind of stuff and it's just a different perspective. In the US, you know, you go to a kind of, maybe it's a war museum or maybe like a airplane museum or something, and they'll have like a Vietnamese plane as an example or whatever, and it's just the other side of the story.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It's good to know. It's an interesting interesting concept anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, like, going through, I just had a lot of good times. A lot of beer was had, obviously, with all these locals. Most people didn't speak English, but they were happy to, buy you a bunch of beer and show you around. Doing the best they could. Just typical, like, good-natured folk. Yeah, really amazing
surprised.
experience. Like, these areas going through that had been bombed, like in Hawaii City, that had been absolutely bombed. They left all the scorched buildings and stuff in the center of the city. So you're going through there and you're like, well, this wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it's so surprising to me just how different the attitude you get in Vietnam compared to China, because in China there's a lot of resentment towards foreigners.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway.
And the crazy thing is that foreigners helped China so much. Like, when it came to World War II, if it wasn't for all the support of, foreign nations, well, they would just be occupied by Japan, And of course, you got all the century of humiliation and stuff before that. I get it. But, the thing is, in Vietnam, with this recent history where they were at war with America, they're so incredibly friendly to us here. And they don't know how to tell the difference between me and an American.
Nope.
So I suspect when they see me, they think I'm American.
A lot of people do. At least
I've
people
been
we've talked to.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen a friendlier bunch of people. And, we've been so welcomed and looked after here by the locals.
For
it's
sure.
Incredible.
One thing I will say, just to cap this off, is that this is northern Vietnam is where things are happening now. Like the China we saw with all these factories springing up and all the pollution rolling in, especially in Guangdong where we live. Like this is where it's happening now.
Oh yeah, this is literally like where we are here is like China. I don't know, 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a lot of hope for Vietnam. I think as a manufacturing hub, and I think their economy is going to take off big time. And I'm happy it's happening for the people. Because I will say it's a net positive. Like, although I had very rosy experiences 10 years ago, it was in most of the places I went around the country, it was wildly poor. So
sure,
it's good that there's some development coming to the people, and I wish the best for Vietnam.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, great place. And honestly, I can suggest if anyone wants to have an adventure in Asia, Vietnam's a fantastic place to go.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, I guess that's it. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers and stay awesome.